As Sophia walked along the pedestrian path, her mind was preoccupied with the weight of the doctor's words. She was still trying to process the news about her baby's tumor, and the thought of having to travel to Italy for treatment felt overwhelming. She had been feeling so alone and scared, and the doctor's words had only added to her anxiety. But as she approached the roadside, her attention was suddenly diverted to an elderly man who was about to cross the street. He was oblivious to the fast-moving truck that was barreling down the road, and Sophia could see that he was in grave danger. She noticed that he was wearing a hearing aid, and she realized that he must not have heard the truck approaching. Without hesitation, Sophia sprang into action. She sprinted towards the elderly man, her heart racing with urgency. She could hear the truck's horn blaring and the screeching of its tires as it swerves to try and avoid the collision. But Sophia knew she had to act fast if she was going to save the man's life. With a surge of adrenaline, Sophia pushed the elderly man out of the way just as the truck was about to hit him. "Sir, move! Watch out!" she yelled as she pushed the man to safety. She felt a sense of relief wash over her as she saw the man stumble to safety. But her relief was short-lived. The truck's momentum was too great, and it slammed into Sophia with a deafening crash. Sophia felt like she was flying through the air, her body weightless and her senses disoriented. She was aware of a searing pain in her abdomen, and she knew that she had been hit with tremendous force. As she landed on the hard pavement, she felt a jolt of agony, and her vision began to blur. The next thing Sophia knew, she was surrounded by a crowd of people who were shouting and screaming for help. Someone was calling out for an ambulance, and Sophia could hear the sound of sirens approaching in the distance. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Please, save my children," she gasped, her vision fading to black. As the ambulance arrived and the paramedics rushed to her side, Sophia's world went dark. She was aware of being lifted onto a stretcher and loaded into the ambulance, but she couldn't move or speak. She was trapped in a sea of pain and fear, unable to do anything but pray for her babies to be okay. Meanwhile, Emily's world unraveled in slow motion. At home, time seemed to stand still as she paced the familiar confines of her living room. Each passing second stretched into eternity. Each unanswered call to Sophia's phone, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She clutched the phone in trembling hands, fingers tracing the familiar contours in futile attempts to summon any sign of her friend. Panic gripped her heart like a vice, the unspoken fear of the unknown sinking its claws into her soul. Night descended like a shroud, casting long shadows across the room. Emily's thoughts raced in desperate circles, her mind a labyrinth of dread and despair. Tears streaked down her cheeks unchecked, a silent testament to the depth of her anguish. She collapsed onto the couch, her body trembling with each ragged breath. The weight of uncertainty bore down upon her, crushing her spirit beneath its relentless weight. "Where are you, Sophia?" she whispered into the silence, her voice a plea that echoed into the void. Her mother's presence offered little solace, concern etched deeply into her furrowed brow. "Emily, darling, we'll find her," she reassured, her voice a soothing balm amidst the storm raging within her daughter. "We'll find her, I promise." But Emily's mind was a tempest of fear and guilt. Had she missed some sign, some cry for help that Sophia had silently voiced? Questions swirled like a maelstrom, each one a dagger in her heart as she wrestled with the unknown. Little did she know, Sophia lay trapped in a hospital bed, her life hanging in the balance. Machines beeped in a steady rhythm around her, their mechanical symphony a stark contrast to the fragile existence she clung to. She was surrounded by the beeping of machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, her body battered and bruised from the accident. But despite the pain and the fear, Sophia's thoughts were consumed by one thing: her babies. She had to save them, no matter what it took. Sophia's world was a blur of pain and darkness. She was aware of being in a hospital, but she couldn't remember how she got there. She tried to move, but her body felt heavy and unresponsive, as if it was weighed down by an invisible force. She was trapped in a sea of agony, unable to do anything but pray for her babies to be okay. Sophia's gaze fell upon the hospital room around her. The walls were a pale blue, and the floor was a dull grey. The bed she was in was surrounded by machines and monitors, their beeps and hums filling the air like a constant reminder of her fragile state. The smell of antiseptic and disinfectant hung heavy in the air, making her stomach turn. Sophia's body felt like it was on fire, her abdomen aching with a dull, throbbing pain. She could feel the weight of her babies inside her, their tiny kicks and movements, a reminder of the life growing within her. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper, a faint murmur that was lost in the din of machines and monitors. As she lay there, Sophia's mind raced with thoughts of her unborn children. She had to save them, no matter what it took. She couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to them, of them being hurt or in danger. She thought of their tiny fingers and toes, their delicate features and precious lives. She had to protect them, no matter what. Suddenly, a voice pierced the darkness, a beacon of hope in the midst of her despair. "Sophia, can you hear me? We're going to do everything we can to save your babies." The voice was calm and reassuring, a steady presence in the midst of chaos. Sophia tried to respond, but her voice was barely a whisper, a faint murmur that was lost in the din of machines and monitors. "Please save them," she begged, her words tumbling out in a desperate plea. The voice grew louder, more urgent, a call to action in the midst of her desperation. "We're going to do an emergency C-section, Sophia. We have to get your babies out as soon as possible." The words were like a lifeline, a promise of hope in the midst of her fear. Sophia's heart raced with fear, a pounding drumbeat that echoed through her chest. She was aware of being wheeled into an operating room, of doctors and nurses rushing around her like a well-oiled machine. She felt a sense of panic, of helplessness, as if she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't awaken. And then, the pain hit her like a tidal wave, a searing agony that ripped through her abdomen like a knife. She felt her stomach being cut open, her muscles tearing apart like paper. She screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the machines and the surrounding chaos. As the doctors worked to deliver her babies, Sophia's heart stopped beating. She felt herself being pulled away from her body, away from the pain and the fear. She was floating above the operating room, watching as the doctors and nurses worked to bring her back to life. "Come on, Sophia, stay with us," one of the doctors yelled, his voice piercing the darkness. "We need you to stay awake, Sophia. Fight for your babies." Sophia felt a jolt of electricity, a shock that ran through her body like a defibrillator. Her heart started beating again, a slow, steady rhythm that echoed through her chest. When Sophia came to, she was groggy and disoriented, her mind foggy and unclear. She was aware of being in a hospital room, surrounded by machines and monitors that beat and hummed like a symphony of sound. And then she saw them, her babies, lying in incubators beside her like tiny, fragile miracles. Sophia's heart swelled with love and gratitude, a tidal wave of emotion that crashed over her like a stormy sea. She had done it. She had saved her babies. Tears of joy streamed down her face. She reached out a trembling hand to touch their tiny fingers, to feel their soft, delicate skin. "Hello, little ones," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of machines. "Welcome to the world." The words were a prayer, a blessing, a promise of love and protection that would last a lifetime. As Sophia gazed at her babies, she felt a sense of peace wash over her, a sense of calm and tranquility that she had never known before. She knew that she would do anything to protect them, to keep them safe from harm. She was their mother, their guardian, their protector, and she would love them forever, no matter what. But as she looked at her babies, Sophia felt her vision begin to blur. The machines and monitors around her grew quieter, their beeps and hums fading into the distance. She felt herself being pulled away from the pain and the fear, away from the world. She tried to fight it, to stay awake and aware. But it was no use. Sophia's eyes grew heavy, her eyelids drooping like weights. She felt herself falling into a deep and endless sleep. And then she was gone. Her body relaxed, her breathing slowed, and Sophia fell into a deep coma, surrounded by her precious babies and the machines that kept her alive.